frankly, in terms of strategy, etc. I think execution eats strategy for lunch, because strategy is only 5 to 10%. Really, the execution rigor, which is what we drove, and we drove that very intensely, helped us to get to it. And that, in fact, is a good segue to the part about Headstrong. So the company had grown big, .com boom had happened, the bust had followed through. We were lucky in some sense that there was massive amount of fiscal jurisprudence that we exercised. We were not very extravagant. So what happened was, I remember my friends, they had cards, they had business cards. They used to live in the valley. They roamed around only in that perhaps zip code, no more than that. But their cards had Japanese on one side and English on the other side. Because it was fashionable to have, a business in Japan, even though they didn't have anything close to it. They would go for their offsites to Rio or to places like exotic locations. Our offsite meetings were back in the weekend in our office, because we said, hey, we had a large boardroom table and there's nobody in the office to disturb us, so we will go back in there. So I think that helped us really actually manage the up and down briefly. But by 2003, what had happened was the business had shifted quite dramatically. Headstrong used to be called James Martin, and they actually got a bunch of money. They raised about $200 million from a big private equity player out of New York called Welch, Carson, Anderson and Stowe. They're a $15 billion PE fund. And they were looking to actually buy somebody who had a big presence in India. Their own presence, they were doing offshore work, but their own presence was largely in Philippines, and by that time it was quite apparent that if you were doing anything in the IT services outsourcing market, India was the #1 name recall, so you had to have a presence in India. So they, because of our past relationship with James Martin, they approached us, and like I said, Goldman themselves at that point in time, they have, funds have their own cycles. They have to exit, they buy a portfolio company, run it for a while, and they have to exit. So they were coming to the end of their fund cycle and they were looking for an exit. So we exited, the price was right. And that's how we sold to Headstrong. But interesting thing was, we sold in October and our first board meeting was in December, 2 months later. And in the 2 months that we were there, it was quite apparent that we couldn't stay back, because we just didn't have an intellectual respect for the team there. And we thought that the team there was not going to was not being true to the investors. So we approached our investors and mentioned to them that, hey, we can be here, but if you put us in control and you give us unfettered, uninhibited control over the business. And the investors had seen us, they had done a lot of due diligence on us, and they realized that that we were all together, which is a rare thing, for teams to move together. One or two individuals to move together is one thing, but for teams to move together and have been together for a long period of time, is a significant thing. So they believed in us at that point in time, and the reverse thing happened. The cap table was rewritten. We obviously wanted a much bigger piece of the pie. We were not going to do it for nothing. So we said, you have to give us a much bigger equity share.
So this is how you can have your cake and eat it too. You get acquired by a company, you get paid money for it, and then once you get acquired, you go back and then you acquire the company that acquired you, without necessarily putting any more money for it, and you get more equity in the process. Now, that's a Cinderella story. And I think it really only comes across because Cinderella was so beautiful, right? So the resume that you guys had and your track record was so good that really helped you to reverse the tables as it is.
I'm not sure about the Cinderella story, but I think the fact that we all stuck together and, again I would say, the execution was good. This is a thing I cannot emphasize enough. The execution is a very, very, very strong part that I emphasize in any business. And so I think disproportionate amount of attention and focus on that and being able to deliver something. When we got funded by Goldman, the guys from Goldman told us, this one thing that we do not like, and please don't do that to us. We do not like surprises on the negative side. He says, surprises on the positive side are still okay, but
flag the bad news earlier.
Yes.
Okay. So then what really followed was about 7-8 years of sustained building the business as far as Headstrong is concerned, and a growth of an organization that really grew significantly in size, presence, as well as people. So tell us in terms of the headstrong journey now? How did you really build that organization, and then how did you really take it truly global in terms of presence as well as in all other aspects?
Of course, now in the rear view, everything looks romanticized and embellished and looks very nice, to be honest. But as you're going through the journey, you die 1,000 deaths, and you, like the phoenix, you resurrect, dust yourself off, and start to run again every day, or through every of those events. So many of those things happen. But I think one thing that we realized early on was we were a consulting business, very small consulting business, doing everything for everybody. And really what it meant was that we were doing nothing for nobody, frankly. And we came to that realization early on, and we took a rather bold step, I must say, that almost actually completely broke the company, and we were on the brink of collapse because of that decision. But which was that we said we cannot be everything to everybody, and therefore we have to differentiate and pick something and be the best at that. So we were not the first, we were not the biggest, but can we be the best? That was really the mantra that we adopted, and we said, how do we do that? And when we looked across the portfolio, our portfolio was very vast. We were doing work for pharma companies, for retail companies, for aerospace, etc., etc. And we realized that the one large part of confluence was actually banking. And even in banking, it wasn't transactional or wholesale or consumer banking, it was really investment banking. So we went out and said, the company really has to change, and this is something that we said was Headstrong 2.0. We said this is our new avatar, and we pushed through that. And we pushed through that, with a very strong conviction. Because the motivation to say, when you're a small company, revenue seems to be everything. And there's massive temptation not to let go of revenue. But we said that, if we don't do that, if we don't actually say this is the direction that we have to go, and part of saying this is the direction we have to go is also saying part of that this is all the other directions that we're not going to go, right? And to act on that was very important. So we actually went to customers. We went to customers in retail. I remember making this trip down to Dallas to meet with the CIO of 7-Eleven. 7-Eleven in the US is a Japanese company, but the US headquarters are in Dallas, and I met the CIO there, and I said, you have this is what we are doing. You have two choices. You can either hire our people or tell us our nearest competitor who you want us to transition our people to, and we're very happy to give those guys to them. And frankly, we had lots and lots of boardroom fights and dissonance when we took that decision. But I'm glad we stayed the course. I'm glad we stayed the course because eventually we were able to come around, build a business that differentiated itself. And that differentiation paid off, by us being different to our clients, to our employees, and to everybody else in between. So that was really a big thing.
That's truly a good message because, as entrepreneurs, all of us get blindsided with the opportunities that you see all around you. And you say, okay, let's do this. But like you said, yes, you did that also. But then you came back and realized that, hey, amongst all the things that we're doing, let's go after one thing and do that extremely well. And that really helped you because, you went after investing in banking, right, as a focus. And I think that's a great lesson for all of the entrepreneurs to really look at, right? Figure out what is it that you're doing well or what is it doing very well, and then become the best at that, rather than trying to become average at maybe 5 things as it is, isn't it?
Yeah, again, many of you probably are here from business school. I went to a business school, and in business schools they teach you what's your plan B, plan C, D, E, all the letters in the alphabet. We said there is no plan B. Right? So we said there is no plan B. This is the plan, and you have to persist and continue to do. And this is again for many of you who are doing a startup, and I recognize that some of people here are doing a startup or are aspiring to do a startup. I always say that this is something. Don't lose hope. If you have a good plan, then stick to the plan. Tweak it a little bit, but stick to the plan and be persistent with the plan. And eventually, it pays dividends.
And like they say somewhere, right? That top line is vanity, but bottom line is sanity, right? So at the end of the day, that sanity prevailed. And 2011, you had Genpact, who bought over Headstrong for a $550 million deal, 19x EBITDA, right? Now ultimately.